welcome to Tastoria. My name's Kylie. I'm joined by Kate.
Hello.
From Green and Blues.
That's right.
And Ben.
Yeah.
From
Tastoria.
Tastoria. Yeah. And a rather nice wine, I believe. Again, what have we got here?
We've got a very nice wine from the Douro Valley in Portugal, which is, of course, mostly famous for port, and in the last 10, 15 years has become really well known for their red wines as well, made from port grape varieties. What are definitely less well known are white wines. It's not a typical white wine region in many ways. It's very hot. It's quite extreme growing conditions, and often red varieties just they cope with that a lot better than whites. But this, actually, I can safely say this is the nicest white I've ever tasted from the Douro. I think this is absolutely delicious. Some of them can tend to be ever so slightly baked, which is not surprising given the temperature.
The sunshine.
Yes.
What kind of grape are we dealing with?
This is a blend of three. There's something called Verdejo, which is also known as Verdelho in some places.
In Australia and New Zealand, we call it
That's
Verdelho.
right.
Yeah.
Something called Surya, which is very obscure and you really don't see very often. And then something called Ribogato, which is used fairly widely in Portugal, both in the north and further south in the Alentejo, etc. It's made on a property that's been in this family. They're called the Madeiras, which is a nice
good name.
Portuguese winey name.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they've owned this land for 7 generations, but they've only recently converted to organic viticulture. It's incredibly easy to be organic in the Douro because it's hot and it's dry, so fungicides are...
What drove them to do that? I mean, was it a commercial sense or just a philosophical?
Honest, Ben, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, in my experience, it's often a combination of the two, really.
Yeah.
And often a winemaker will try it just almost out of interest and be so impressed with the quality results that they will then convert. You know, in the case of this wine, and a lot of the wines we do, it's not really a marketing exercise because they make no mention of it on the label.
Yeah, sure.
And I know that certainly a lot of the winemakers that we stock who are organic have said to me that they would never put it on their label because they don't want to be in that camp. They feel that a lot of people who are, who market it really strongly,
It's quite sad.
Wine all the time.
It's quite sad, but I do understand, and I think there are a lot of people there who are very cynical and say exactly that. If you have to put organic on the label, you are hiding something.
Exactly. So they want the wine to stand on its own merits. They believe it's a better wine for that.
One of the things about organic wines, in comparison with lots of other organic produce, is you don't pay that much more. You know, like you pay kind of double for vegetables and fruit and all the rest of that if it's going to be organic. Yeah. But with wine, it doesn't seem, too much more expensive at all.
Well, no, it isn't always, which is fabulous.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you very much to the winemakers. I mean, sometimes it is, but then it's an expensive wine that has all sorts of other higher production values which make it more expensive. You certainly save money on chemicals when you farm organically, but it generally is more expensive because you have to do more things by hand, so you have to pay more people, which does often work out more.
It's very interesting you pour this actually, because if you look at when you poured it, and I think you think about hot climate, you're thinking very ripe grapes, especially with the grape varieties that are in this wine. Some of them have quite intense colour, and it's got that lovely kind of almost limpid kind of colour, but it's still golden, but it's really lovely and actually instantly inviting. And I can just imagine being in Portugal. It's hot, it's dry. I'm looking at the Douro. Yeah. I'm thinking good times, and when you poured this, instantly there was just a little sort of fragrance coming out there, just really, really pretty, really evocative smell, and I'm dying to try it.
Quite a sweet smell, isn't it? I wasn't expecting it to be at all, but it's quite sweet.
It absolutely is. There's a lot of honey on the nose. I mean, it's then a bit of a surprise when you taste it because it is actually dry, although it is very sort of rich and viscous.
It's very textured wine. How do they struggle? I mean, do they struggle with ripeness here? Here, I guess, is a problem of over-ripeness.
It tastes very ripe. I wouldn't say over-ripe, but I'd say I see what you mean when you say ripeness. Yeah, exactly.
And it's more like the sort of I'm loath to use specific fruit terms, but tropical fruit characters. But that acidity is very precise and very good minerality, and it just goes all the way through. And I imagine that growing and making wines like this is quite hard because you're always dicing with just do we leave it a little bit more just to get a little bit more right, and then suddenly
Yeah.
it all falls apart. And I think this is very clever wine.
It's incredibly well balanced, but you'll find that a lot of organic winemakers are absolutely convinced, particularly the ones that were maybe farming conventionally and then converted, that when you are farming organically, because the vine is so much more rooted in its own environment, you haven't cut it off from natural cycles by pumping it full of really quite revolting chemicals. In effect, turning it into a bit of a junkie, and junkies are not necessarily in reality in the way they should be.